Hello everyone, I'm Ben and this is Facing East, and today we are rebutting Ascent of Mount Carmel's video on the Eastern Catholic Churches. So before we get into his video on the Eastern Catholic Churches, I'll read you the about for Ascent of Mount Carmel. In his about, he claims that he is a page dealing with traditional Catholicism built on the foundation of the spirituality of Saint John of the Cross. So let's get into his video on the Eastern Catholic Churches.
Everybody sing Alleluia, for the Lord has risen, it is true. Everybody sing Alleluia. 30 years he walked the land, Alleluia, Alleluia. To all in need he lent his hand, Alleluia, Alleluia.
That was a real rough intro.
Alleluia. Everybody sing.
Hello, welcome to this playlist, which is devoted to an analysis and better understanding of the Second Vatican Council. As you recall, in our past installments we discussed church dogma as it was promulgated by the papal bull Quo Primum. Quo Primum said, "This new rite alone," meaning the Latin Mass, is to be
Quo Primum had nothing to do with the Eastern churches. It was specifically about standardizing the Latin Mass against the Protestants.
used unless approval of the practice of saying Mass differently was given at the very time of the institution and confirmation of the Church by the Apostolic See at least 200 years ago, or unless there has prevailed a custom of a similar kind which has been continuously followed for a period of not less than 200 years, in which case we see no reason to rescind their above-mentioned prerogative or custom. So, Quo Primum carved out the ancient Eastern rites of the Catholic Church.
It did not carve out the Eastern rites of the Catholic Church. The Eastern rites of the Catholic Church were fully allowed long before it, and it had no power to suppress them even if they wanted to.
And this is really good news because it means that there are other licit liturgies in the Catholic Church other than just the Latin Mass. Now,
This is accurate. Quo Primum explicitly allowed for Western liturgies outside of the TLM to exist. If they were, older than 200 years old, because you had to fight the Protestants, which is actually what Trent was all about.
I don't want to represent myself as an expert on the Eastern rites.
I'm not considering you to be an expert on the Eastern rites.
I've only been to 6 different churches from 4 different rites, and 3 of those 4 rites were Byzantine Catholic rites.
You've been to 6 parishes from 4 church suiuris, of which 3 were Byzantine Rite churches.
And that's a subset of the Eastern rites.
No, the Byzantine Rite is not a subset of the Eastern rites. The Byzantine Rite is an Eastern Rite.
I also attended a Romanian Byzantine Catholic church almost exclusively for about 2 or 3 years as I transitioned from the Novus Ordo to the Latin Mass. And I still go there a couple nights a week for
You didn't go to a Byzantine church because you actually liked the Byzantine liturgy. You went because you didn't like the Mass of your own church and you were disobedient to your bishop until you could find another Western church that would take you.
evening services. There are about 23 Eastern rites, and a list of them is on your screen. Now, personally, I love the Divine Liturgy of St. John.
There are not 23 Eastern rites. There are 23 Eastern Catholic churches in communion with Rome.
Chrystom, which is the liturgy used by the various Byzantine rites.
The Divine Liturgy of St. John Chrysostom is one of the 3 Eucharistic liturgies used by the Byzantine Rite.
And it's no less reverent than the Latin Mass. However, it is very different from the Latin Mass as well as the Novus Ordo Mass. As I'm recording this video, it's now Lent. And on weekdays during Lent, the Byzantine rites celebrate the liturgy of the pre-sanctified gifts.
This was actually a fairly accurate statement. On weekdays during Lent, we celebrate the Divine Liturgy of the Pre-Sanctified Gifts. Nice.
And in my opinion, the chanting of this liturgy is even more beautiful than the regular liturgy. And if you have a Byzantine church in
I actually agree with him, at least in the Ruthenian church. I love the music of the Pre-Sanctified liturgy.
your area, you might want to check it out. Below I have a link to a directory of Byzantine Catholic churches. Many, though not all of the Eastern liturgies, are said in the vernacular. But that's okay, since the Eastern rites were exempted from the prohibition of using the vernacular.
I'm not sure what he's talking about here. So, up until the 1960s, it was highly frowned upon for the Eastern churches to use the vernacular. As far as I'm aware, the Melkites did it against the wishes of Rome prior to Vatican II. The Ruthenians didn't start doing it until the 1950s when Bishop Fulton Sheen did it and did the Divine Liturgy in the vernacular at Mount St. Macrina. But I don't think it actually became standard until after Vatican II. I have no idea what he's talking about when he says we were exempt from anything.
And the translations to the vernacular actually vary from rite to rite, and even they vary from church to church within a rite in some cases. Also, the tones or the notes of the chanting vary a great deal too, maybe more so than the translations. And like the Latin Mass, when you have a priest and a cantor who both have really good voices and can hold a note, it really enhances the experience.
He's not wrong. If you get a cantor and a priest who can belt back and forth with each other, or a deacon included in that, you end up with something real special.
As I said previously, my earlier experience was with the Novus Ordo Mass. I'd gotten used to a cantor doing a Mariah Carey imitation and the rest of the congregation just sitting in silence.
It sounds like you went to some really bad Novus Ordos. Maybe you should give it a shot where it's actually done well.
So when I first went to the Romanian Byzantine Church, it was almost unsettling how much volume could be generated by such a small congregation. It seemed as if everyone there was participating to the top of their voices.
This is a byproduct of the Byzantine tradition of the people participating in the liturgy.
However, this isn't necessarily the case with every Eastern Rite church. The primary purpose of some of the Eastern churches, even within a rite, seems to be to serve an ethnic community.
The purpose of the church is not to serve an ethnic community. An ethnic community is typically serviced by a jurisdiction that's based around territory, right? So the Melkites are from Antioch, so a lot of their people are Antiochian or Syriac. The Ukrainian church comes from Ukraine, so a lot of their people are Ukrainian. It's not explicitly to serve those people, it's that those people are members of that church Seiuris.
But others seem to attract refugees from the Novus Ordo and some Protestant converts as well. And even within a particular rite, there's a different personality to every congregation.
Within individual churches, the rite it has nothing to do with this. The rite is the liturgy practiced. You're talking about Seiuris churches and parishes.
And of the 6 different Eastern Rite churches I attended, it was interesting that 4 of the 6 had parishioners going way out of their way to introduce themselves, be friendly, and try to explain everything that I might have had a question about. And as
This is actually pretty accurate. A lot of the time, whenever I go to a Byzantine parish that I haven't been to before, even though I am fully Byzantine and aware of what's going on, it's always incredibly welcoming. They're always ready to explain stuff. And it is a very pleasant experience. It's a very welcoming experience at a lot of Byzantine parishes, especially small parishes.
for the other 2 churches, I attended Mass at them both multiple times, so I don't think I just caught them on a bad day. As I said, every church has a different personality. There's a subtle, though a different spirituality within the Byzantine rites. And to me, the Latin rite is more outward focused. Historically, we tried to convert the world, and we've been willing to fight and die in holy wars. But with the Eastern rites, at least the Byzantine rites, they're more inwardly focused. And this is probably due in part that there's a strong monastic tradition in the East, and that dates way back to the Desert Fathers. This might also be due to the fact that in most countries, the Eastern rites constitute a small minority of the population.
In most Western countries, the Eastern rites make up a small minority. In the United States, for example, or in the United Kingdom, or in France, or in Spain or Italy. Yeah, we make up a small percentage. Now think about the Catholic percentages in Turkey, or Russia, or Ukraine. We make up a majority of Catholics in Eastern Europe, in the Middle East. This statement is completely based around Europe and the Americas.
And Please note that the inward focus really isn't contrary to the spirituality of St. John of the Cross. I should also note that the Eastern rites have their fair share of modernists. Also,
Ugh.
there are some priests who introduce new innovations to the liturgies.
Double ugh.
And finally, there's probably even more ecumenism in the Eastern rites than there is in the Novus Ordo Church. The Second Vatican Council had something to say about the Eastern rites in Sacrosanctum Concilium. Article 3 said, "Practical norms should be established. Among these principles and norms there are some which can and should be applied to both the Roman Rite and also to the other rites." Article 4 continues, "The Council also desires that, where necessary, the rites be revised carefully in the light of sound tradition, that they may be given new vigor to meet the circumstances and needs of modern times." So as a result of the Second Vatican Council, no Eastern liturgy became more similar to the Latin Mass. However,
Good.
different rites went in different directions with this supposed directive from the Second Vatican Council. For instance, the liturgies of some of the Eastern rites are now very similar to the Novus Ordo. They feature communion in the hand and the sign of peace, and there's only small differences from the Novus Ordo.
He's talking about the Maronites, not multiple Eastern rites. He's talking about the Maronites.
Therefore, if there is such a person out there who exists who likes the Novus Ordo Mass but is uneasy about attending it because it's illicit, that person can go to a illicit version of that Mass in some Eastern Catholic churches.
If the Novus Ordo is illicit, why is the Novus Ordoized version of the Maronite liturgy allowed? What?
Now, the Byzantine churches actually went out almost in an opposite direction. They haven't become any more like the Novus Ordo, but they have eliminated westernizations in the liturgy
Good.
and devotions of the church.
Good, we're going back to our own devotions.
And now many people have mixed feelings about this, and this is a hot topic, and you may find discussions of this on other channels and videos.
It's a hot topic among those who grew up with the Latinized traditions. That it's an unfortunate reality that they grew up with traditions inauthentic to their own church. And I am sympathetic to them using those traditions in their private prayer life. However, these Latin traditions do not have a place within Byzantine church liturgical life. For example, he talked about pre-sanctified gifts. If he wants to go back to the Byzantine Catholic churches as they were before Vatican II, that liturgy is going away. We are now going to be doing the Stations of the Cross during Lent because the Divine Liturgy of the Pre-Sanctified Gifts was knocked out. That's just one example.
The de-Latinization of the Byzantine rites began long before the Second Vatican Council, and it was actually dates back to the reign of Pope Leo XIII. However, the de-Latinization or de-Westernization has taken the form of kind of a purge, and it's been eliminating devotions to things that I would like statues and the rosary.
Note that he says things that he would like statues and the rosary. Statues have no place in Eastern spirituality, nor does the rosary, in terms of liturgical usage. The rosary doesn't have a liturgical usage within any church. It is a private devotion. The Latin Church, if it wants to be authentic to its tradition, which I don't think this man actually cares about, should be going back to the Liturgy of the Hours and should be using Vespers and Matins before liturgy on Sundays, and if they include having a vigil divine liturgy in the evening. But the idea of the rosary before the liturgy is completely foreign to ancient and or relatively recent history.
And this has created a backlash, particularly in the Ukraine, where there's now a counterpart to the Society of St. Pius X called the Priestly Society of St. Josaphat. And the
Priestly Society of St. Josaphat has been excommunicated by their bishop and is outside of the communion with the Roman Catholic Church.
society is refusing to eliminate the devotions to which many Catholics got comfort from when the church was forced to go underground during communist rule. Well, I hope you enjoyed this installment of this playlist. We'll be back again in about a week with another one. In the meantime, Please pray for the church.
Well, that was something. So, if you want to see more videos like this, let me know. He has a lot of what I would call ignorant videos to the Eastern Catholic churches on his channel, as well as the Orthodox churches. He attacks Orthodox traditions that are upheld by Eastern Catholics, and I think it can make for an interesting series. But if you guys could let me know, I would greatly appreciate it.